Loud and clear. Yeah. Okay, it is 12 noon, August 9th, 2021. It's a regular assembly meeting. And I would like the clerk to please call the roll.
Mark,
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
David,
Here.
Jay,
Excused.
Chelsea,
Here.
Taylor,
Excused.
Bob,
Here. Okay, it's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Okay, approval of minutes. We have one date for approval, the regular assembly meeting of July 19th, 2021. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes if there's no changes. Second. Okay, motion's been made in a second. No changes. All those in favor of approval of those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, those minutes are accepted. And just for a note here, a request has been submitted to Municode to add excuse to the roll call section of the software. In the meantime, the clerk will note in the narrative who is absent and who is excused from the meeting. So something different than the last setup we had. Now time for amendment and approval of today's meeting agenda. Are there any changes?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I would like to take items 9 and 16C and move them to the end of the meeting. Both of these have to do with the manager's contract, and it'd be better to put those together, I believe. And then we have a better flow of the meeting. Thank you.
And that. Okay, motion's been made to amend the meeting agenda to move 9C or 9, which is an executive session on the manager's contract evaluation, and item 16C, the manager's contract, to the end of the meeting, so we don't have a break in the middle of the meeting by going into executive session. So any discussion on that amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will make that change, and I might be a little rusty today running the meeting. It's been since May, so if the clerk will keep me on task if I get lost somewhere in the works here. So the next item on the agenda is item 5A. It's an ordinance, public hearing for an ordinance 2021-12. This is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of electric utility revenue bonds in an aggregate amount not to exceed $7.8 million to finance the Blind Slough Hydroelectric refurbishment project and the Scow Bay Standby Generation Project, and directing that this matter be submitted to the voters for consideration at the next regular election to be held October 5th, 2021. Is there anyone zooming in or in the audience who would like to participate in this public hearing? Seeing none and hearing none, that public hearing is now closed.
Mayor Jensen,
Yes.
may I just get a verbal from everyone that we did amend the agenda? Can I just get a verbal from everyone that they approve the agenda as amended before we go any farther? Please.
I thought we voted on that, but yes.
We just voted on the amendment.
Right.
Oh, okay,
Right,
yeah.
not you.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay.
Like I asked, keep me on track.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, item 6, there are no bid awards today. That brings us to item 7. And that item is persons to be heard related to items on today's agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak on items related to today's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move to item 8. Persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. Is there anyone in the queue for either?
There is not.
Okay, so no one calling in. I see no one in the audience, so that will move on to 10 because item 9 was moved to the end of the meeting. Board, commission, and committee reports. There are none listed today. There are no items under item 11, consent agenda. And so that brings us to report of other officers. Petersburg Medical Center update. PMC CEO Hofstadter will provide an update on the medical center. So Phil?
All right, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Just a couple updates. The first is going to deal with some COVID updates locally, and the second is going to be around the new hospital and some conversation around that and some action items we've had with our PMC board. So a few things. We're still dealing with COVID at the hospital. I know that the EOC has been disbanded. It'd be nice if we had sort of a scaled back version of that if possible, simply because we're having some difficulty getting communication to the community. We're also having, working with the school and other agencies related to some mitigation plans. So again, not necessarily full on EOC, but it's certainly missed that when we don't have that structure. I talked to Steve a bit about getting some information even back on the Borough website. A couple of things that we're dealing with, you must have heard in the news related to COVID is the Delta variant. When I talk with the state about the Delta variant, it's certainly a lot more transmissible. They haven't made the determination on severity, but if you talk about original COVID, you're looking at transmission of 1 to 3 people, and with the variant, you're looking at about 5 to 8. So it's certainly a lot higher. Over the weekend, for example, we had 8 people on a boat contracted in Juneau, and so we're still dealing with it. Southeast in particular has been having an increase. ASHNA, which is our state hospital association, had a press release last week where a lot of hospitalizations in the state are almost at capacity. Regional, Providence, A&MC, Ketchikan, those areas are dealing with a lot of outbreaks. Sitka also. So something to be vigilant of, something to be aware of. Things like monoclonal antibody, which is a treatment. The state of Alaska is trying to push some messaging out there that 80% of people who have COVID are eligible for this. And the trick is to get identified and tested as soon as possible. It's only effective within the first 5 days of detection. So it really reduces the hospitalization. And so that's whether you're immunized or not. So making sure that we're pushing that as well as vaccinations. That's it for COVID. As far as the new hospital, a few things that with the increased conversation out there, our board has met last month, and the PMC board has created a specific committee called the Community Engagement Committee, and it's a work group to focus on a few specific areas. And what we'd like to do is engage some stakeholders. We'd also like to talk about creating a few more work groups with the assembly and the board to establish some good communication updates, next steps, and involving some dialogue with the community as well related to the new facility. So potentially quarterly would be something to consider. And along similar lines, we want to start doing some outreach with stakeholders in the community. Our board chair, Jared, and I met with PIA last week, and there was some great feedback and some communication and recommendations at that meeting that I think that starting to increase some stakeholder engagement is really important. In addition, we'd like to maybe even think about a town hall style meeting, COVID approved, of course. But it's one of the trends that we saw when we did our community needs assessment is an opportunity for the community to have dialogue. So for the next phase, for example, where we're talking about site selection, that's certainly something that we would want to engage not just community stakeholders, but maybe looking at that a little bit closer from an engineering standpoint, looking at the geotech, environmental analysis, but also making sure that it is the appropriate locations have been vetted really well. The site selection predates me, so I know that maybe there's some further analysis that needs to be done, and just making sure we have community involvement in that process as well. I did meet with Search for a second time, and again, looking at collaboration and partnerships are all great opportunities, but I think stressing the importance that Petersburg is defining those relationships, because we certainly don't want to lose healthcare services. We don't want to lose our local control, and we want to try to maintain its operations as much as possible. So we continue that dialogue with that in mind, but also just making sure the community is involved and making sure they have an opportunity to find the services that are represented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hofstadter. Are there any questions of the review chief?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few to fill, and I guess I have them divided between the new hospital and COVID. The first one is, what's the status of the environmental work?
So that's going to be built into the next phase. So again, looking at an approach of funding, the next phase would be geotech, environmental study of the existing lots that were selected. But, there was some great comments on, with stakeholder conversation about impacts of those lots, looking at from an engineering standpoint, infrastructure as far as sewer, water, sidewalks, impact to the existing trail system, those kinds of things. So I think there's opportunity to really explore that further.
So, well, the next phase, which is the environmental work and geotechnical work, will that also have with it the 3 sites, or is the 3 sites a total separate phase?
So the next phase was to evaluate the 3 sites that were of the 5 that were indicated. The master planning looked at 3 most favorable sites based on some of the things I mentioned, and of those 3, doing environmental study and geotech with those 3. I guess the question is to maybe hire somebody in that next phase to evaluate if maybe there's another site with either community feedback or for infrastructure purposes that would be even better.
And you mentioned stakeholder meetings, and you also mentioned community meetings. When might you be scheduling some type of community meeting for maybe a series of meetings to talk about either site selection, building design? When do you envision that to happen?
I think the next step for decision making is to actually look at some dates and find out, quickly in the fall, September, October range is what I was thinking, to actually have a community dialogue. I think from now until then, it's possible to have stakeholder meetings as well, since they're smaller.
With the $8 million that Senator Murkowski has put as a placeholder somewhere, I know it hasn't passed yet, that helps with the site preparation, but what are you thinking about funding for the phases of the project before that? Or do you have a vision for that yet?
Yeah, I mean, the next phase would be part of that funding. Again, there's never did I think we're going to do this overnight.
Sure.
So the idea is looking at decision making, looking at that we need to actually have a new facility, and then looking at things that we can do until we get funding. So I'm obviously always looking for funding, and USDA has there's good conversation there, potentially, nothing guaranteed. Denali Commission, again, great conversation. There's some opportunity potentially with some infrastructure funding coming to the Denali Commission potentially. So those are things that we'll look at. So grants to move some of these other concepts forward. I also have to talk to the board. We'll look at our financial statements and maybe funding some of this ourselves or in collaboration with. So there's some in-kind that potentially we could do. Obviously, those are the parameters of the grant sometimes, and require some in-kind funding. So those are all things that we'd have to discuss at the board level.
I have a few more questions on COVID, but I let somebody else ask some questions.
Kinsinger had a question, I believe.
Yes, you mentioned that you would like to facilitate communication with the community a little bit better about COVID, and what are you looking for us to do as an assembly to make that happen? What specifically would you like to see happen?
Well, I mean, I think just some of the, going back to COVID, I think some of the gaps that we saw was just getting communication out to the public. So it's as simple as, availability of information on the Borough website, press releases that we've had that can get pushed forward to through the Borough as well. Accurate, more real-time information. Sandy's doing a great job sitting in on these committees, but maybe providing a little help with her to the established communication back to the assembly and also, helping the schools on, putting together a mitigation plan. These are all things that we're just doing, but having it more structured would be great. I'll leave it to the assembly to kind of define that structure again. I do not think it has to be a big, EOC scaled kind of, area, but some version of that where you're having sort of the elements in place would be helpful.
So what I'm hearing is you want to have a point person, borough staff to be designated to be kind of a liaison between the hospital, the school, and the community.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the original EOC structure, you have your incident command, you have your operations, you have logistics, and those are structures that are not in place anymore. So Sandy is pretty much the only person going to the meetings. So just instilling some of those positions without necessarily a ton of authority, I suppose, behind it, but just keeping some of those positions alive so that good communication, ordering supplies, for example. With the state, you have to fill out a form. It's called the 213 RR. I'm surprised that I know what that means, but that I have to fill out that form that goes to the state. That function has to go. Typically, it goes through the city, and the city goes through the state, and the state sends it to the city, and then it comes down to the hospital. Those kinds of things.
You want to follow up question?
Right. I guess I would direct this to the borough manager. If he has any thoughts on how we could facilitate this.
Through the mayor. Yeah, I mean, with the EOC being disbanded and the emergency declaration expired, we can't run up another EOC. That's a factor of the disaster declaration. That doesn't mean that we couldn't try to find some help. Of course, it means pulling department heads back like we were during the full-blown COVID off of their regular jobs to try to help out, which again, we can do, and it's probably we need to get some help out there. Tara's going to be back from vacation, and we were going to start doing a lot of work on making sure all the hospital website stuff and press releases are actually on the borough website as well. You can go see it all now in the hospital. They've got a really good site that covers all this. But, we keep hearing people don't look hard. They go to the borough site, can't find it, and they give up instead of going to the hospital website to see where it's all being updated on a regular basis. So we can carry that stuff over. The whole logistics side of it, I've got to put some thought into it. I can't afford to pull Chris back into doing that right now. We've got to get that building done up there, and we've got a huge project with that culvert that washed out. So same with Carl. He has got, we all put a lot of projects aside during COVID. So we'll have to go walk through and figure out who we can spare to try to do some of these other things. It'll take some thought.
Would it be possible by our next meeting a week from now, if you kind of gave some thought to it and see where you could outline that would meet Phil's needs and the borough's needs as well? It sounds like we just need a little bit of help in facilitation on communication. Maybe I'm putting words in the Phil's mouth, but I'd like to see us be able to do that, because I want us to stay in the situation we're in right now, where we don't have a lot of COVID cases. We're able to open our schools. Everything's good here right now, but as we know, that could change overnight. So
Well,
I don't want to see that happen.
Sure, and again, through the mayor. That's up to the assembly. I mean, if the assembly wants resources put onto this, that's exactly what we'll do. I want to be careful about committing to a full EOC type environment. We can't do that, again, unless the assembly says, Steve, pull all your department heads. And then we're going to have to do some other things to, back off on some of the projects we've got out there. But I'll definitely put some thought to it and have some recommendations for the assembly if I believe Assemblymember Mucci wants to put an action item on the next agenda, or at least what he sent through. You guys can vote on that. I can provide information, and then we'll go from there.
Berlin, did you have a
I have two questions. The first one for Phil there is, I'm hearing from folks in town that we probably need to have some kind of better authorities on cruise ships, particularly if there's a need to turn them away. Are you hearing that, and how would what's your thoughts, I guess, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I talked to Dr. DeCillo quite a bit. Some of these bullets are, things that he passed on to me as well to make sure he mentioned. The boats is a gap. And, certainly I'm not here to offer suggestions or recommendations. I can just tell you it's a gap we have available testing. We can test anyone. We have free testing. People just need to call a number. We can get people set up on that. But, where the airlines have at least some masking and some control on who comes in and out and some testing available on sites, the boats are really sort of a gap in that area. Cruise ships are certainly, something we just experienced a few weeks ago. And also, every location in Southeast is sort of challenged with that as well. There's a meeting this week that's put on by our state association that's going to have a special meeting. Sandy is going to be attending that meeting as well. So we'll have more information from a Southeast standpoint of the impact and some of the things that hospitals are struggling with, or their state or city EOCs are also dealing with. So probably a little more information to come on that one, but it's a gap in access. Yeah.
Second question I have for you. Earlier, we talked about, they're having some additional meetings, and I may be making an assumption, but I assume you would also like to have borough participation with the hospital board in some of those meetings. Am I right about that?
Which meeting, the COVID or the new facility?
The new facility, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
of course. Yeah. That's one of the recommendations. Certainly when I'm talking about stakeholder meetings and community engagement, would be great to have the assembly representation as well. So we all want to, speak together and have recommendations and listen together on all the different discussions. So as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as Manager Giesbrecht mentioned, I have put in a couple of agenda items for next week's meeting. One of them is to put together some type of response to what Phil's asking for, as well as what we're hearing from the school system as well. I think we at least need to have a small presence in the community, whether it's Steve and whoever he wants to designate to help him with that, whether it's Sandy and some type of medical person to help out. But my intent was just to keep it small. I was looking at websites from all the rest of the communities in Southeast yesterday, and Petersburg Borough is the only one that doesn't have a COVID-19 information update page on it, where you can go to a site on the Petersburg Borough and click on something and it'll take you to a link for the hospital, the school district, and I think we're lacking there. I'll talk about it later in discussion, but the hospital and the school system are under the borough umbrella, and as far as I can tell right now, there is no umbrella that the borough has. It's just we've disbanded the EOC, all the mandates went away, and we've got the hospital and the school district asking for help, and we need to be cognizant of that and do what we can. But yeah, I think we need to do more. I know what the hospital is going through. I would like to see, and I know we're struggling to get that information, but it would be nice if and I know the press releases come out when new stuff is available, but I see in the future, near future or far future, a time when the hospital is going to ask the borough assembly to pivot on something and to do something that we're not paying attention to right now. And I feel uncomfortable about that. And the more information the borough can get, whether it's to Steve and Steve can disseminate it to us, the better I'll be informed when the time comes that we do have to make a decision. And I thank Phil and the hospital board for struggling with this, trying to keep us informed, but yeah, anything we can do to get more information to us, but I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for coming today. I appreciate it.
Member Tremblay?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my support for that idea as well of a I liked that term of the umbrella structure for these groups that are trying to meet this moment, and assisting Sandy and assisting Phil and the rest of the hospital with what these issues are. I think we are not fully out of the woods, as nice as it is to be getting back to these projects that we have all been pushing aside. So however we can make it work with keeping what needs to be happening moving forward borough-wise, but also letting some staff assist at the borough level, I think is an important thing to be considering for, I'd like to be more prepared in case something escalates as a borough more than we would be right now. So I understand, as easy as it would, we all want to be over it and we're not. So thank you, Phil, for making the request. And I hope we're able to find a way to make that happen in a way that doesn't tax our borough staff more than necessary. Oh, and also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And on the question of the facility conversations, I'm looking forward to keeping those ongoing with the community. And we could even get creative with them, you know, have a window display downtown with detail, you know, once we have detailed diagrams of the locations, having a place that people could put sticky notes of their favorites and visual notes. You know, there's a way to get creative with how to have ongoing town dialogue about it that doesn't involve congregating a lot of people in a small enclosed room. So I'm excited to think about how that conversation can keep going.
Any other questions of Phil? I agree with Mr. Hofstadter on more community dialogue and potentially some kind of a town hall meeting in the future. And I've had that discussion with other parties that are involved in this discussion. Elliot Brule from Search and a couple folks from PIA have approached me, and they felt, you know, after the summer fishing season was over and people have time to, like Mr. Hofstadter was talking about, just some little stakeholder meetings and stuff, just to get the information out to the public. And so, yeah, you know, you see all the yard signs up, and so there is concern, and people want to be involved in this discussion as we move forward. So I think we're going the right direction. So if there's no other questions for Mr. Hofstadter, thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Next item under 12, report of other officers is 12B, electric utility bond issue. Utility Director Hageman will present a PowerPoint to the Assembly regarding bond issue information and impacts to electric rates. So thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wait for a couple of seconds. Oh, that was quick. I got it up. Good job. Okay, so this, the PowerPoint should be being shared with the Zoom participants of the meeting right now, and it'll be in the recording as well. So thank you to Debbie and Becky for making that happen. So as we continue on with the discussion on the revenue bond issue for the power department, I thought it was very important and appropriate to have further discussion about the bond issue itself and definitely the impact to rates in Petersburg. We want to be as transparent as possible as we move forward with this. And so this presentation today is hopefully going to provide more information to the Assembly and also the public. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to recap, you know, the reason that we're even talking about this, the projects. We have two projects that are going into this bond issue. The Blind Slough Hydro Project renews all the equipment and controls in the powerhouse and extends that legacy of low-cost hydropower for Petersburg many years into the future. The total project cost is about $9 million, and we're looking to bond about $6.3 million in project costs through the bond issue. And then we have the Scow Bay Generation Project, which adds diesel generation to our system and make sure that we can cover any peaks in our loads in the wintertime. And right now, the current estimated cost is about $1.4 million on that. And we're looking to bond $980,000 to complete the funding on that project. Next slide, please. So overall, again, $6.3 million to bond for Blind Slough, $980,000 to bond for Scow Bay Generation. We have a debt service reserve that we need to have in place for the bond bank. It's a security issue, basically, that if we have some major problem in Petersburg in the department, we've got that already in the bank to make at least 1 year's payment in principal and interest. And there are issuance costs of about $100,000 that go into that bond. So again, the total cost of this bond is $7.8 million. Next slide, please. So as part of this whole effort, the bond bank does require a rate study to be done. We're due in the electric department to do one anyway. We did contract with D. Hiddle and Associates, a consultant by the name of John Heberling, who has helped us out in the past and knows Southeast Alaska. He knows Petersburg, has done some work for SEPA, and has been very responsive to us. We started it 2 years ago, and then COVID hit, and so we got sidetracked for a very long time, but we're back on track now, and John was able to pick up the pieces for us and keep going. So there are a number of things, not just the projects that were included in the rate study. You know, we looked out, excuse me, looked out over the next few years, the end of the rate study, we went out to FY 25. And so there are many things that come into play when you're looking at rates, not just the bonded projects. Of course, inflation and increases to annual operations are always a factor when you look at rates. The debt service of the bond projects, of course. The fuel surcharge during annual SEPA shutdowns. Every year we have the 10-day shutdown where SEPA does maintenance in the springtime, and we're on diesels for those 10 days. And the borough picks up the cost of that fuel while we're generating for that. In the past, recent years, we have not. There is a fuel surcharge section of the code that allows the utility to recoup some of the fuel costs from the ratepayers. We have not done that in the last few years because of the rebates that have been coming back from SEPA. Well, those rebates have dried up, and because of SEPA's position, financial position, and the big projects, namely the submarine cable, that they had to scrape some money together to jump on right away, to Petersburg benefit, by the way. The rebate discussion has been pretty short last couple of years, and frankly, I don't know if it's coming back. So the fuel surcharge is recommended to come back into play in Petersburg for next year, and has been factored into the rate study. Every year, the department has multiple capital outlays that are more geared towards inventory items, power poles, transformers, that kind of thing. But also we have a number of smaller capital projects that we do that are needed, and we fund out of our annual revenues. We don't go into debt for that, just part of the budget process. So we did look out through FY 25 again and plan for some of those projects. Power purchases, SEPA is our main power provider. We buy power from SEPA every year. And during the construction of Blind Slough, there's probably going to be a period of about 6 months when we don't have access to our local hydro. So that means our power purchases are going to go up in that period. So we did factor in additional power purchases during the construction of Blind Slough. We also factored into the mix of potential SEPA wholesale rate increase because that is also being discussed by the SEPA board. And as CEO Atkinson described a month or two ago, the potential schedule for that, we've used that schedule and potential increases of 1/4 cent this year and 1/4 cent next year as placeholders in our rate study to make sure we're covering what we need to. So all those things included, the consultant did a cost of service analysis, which is essentially, it looks at the infrastructure of the department and what the allocation of different parts of the system should be for each customer class. And it basically is a fair way of splitting out what we've built and who it benefits via customer class. And so we did find that the large commercial customers are paying actually more than their fair share by 10% and subsidize other rate classes. And municipal rate that we have in place right now is heavily subsidized by other customer classes. The municipal rate, as you recall, it's a rate to cut costs in the school and general fund some general fund departments. And so that just because you cut the rate doesn't mean that the utility doesn't have the same expenses. So that needs to be picked up by somebody in the other rate classes to subsidize that. And so the current proposal is for the revenues of the department to increase by 9.5% in FY22 and another 9.5% in FY23. And that is revenue increases. It's not, you can't directly apportion that to every rate that that you see in a customer class. Next slide, please. This is a proposal. This is not the proposal. You know, this is one version of what could happen to rates in Petersburg. It does achieve the 9.5% increase in revenue this year and next. And it's important to note that, you know, this proposal is partially based on the cost of service analysis that the consultant did. But as we, you know, of course, the question in front of the assembly right now is about the bond issue. It's passing the bond ordinance to change the rates. There'll be another ordinance, you know, that affects the electric utilities governing ordinances. And that's when the rate discussion will happen. And as we dig into that, you know, the knowledge of the 9.5% per year is really the starting point. And then how the rates work out can be a much longer discussion, and probably will be a much longer discussion, because there are many things that could be done to shift costs here and there. The consultant felt that cost of service is a good way to go. This proposal doesn't get us there fully, but it gets us closer. And so that'll be something that I'll be asking the assembly their feelings on later on this year if the bond ordinance were to pass. Next slide, please. We did do some comparisons with that rate proposal just to show the assembly and the community where we sit in Petersburg as far as our rates. This is an example of a residential billing comparison. And honestly, it's not a very good one, because the average usage in Petersburg for residents is about 1,400 in the wintertime, or actually all year round, it's about 1,400. So this would be a very high-end customer, a very power-heavy user in a residential setting. But I did want to show, you know, even on the high end, what we were looking at. So as you can see, Petersburg on the bottom, we've got the different communities. This is a comparison between a residential billing in different communities based on 3,000 kilowatt hours of usage in a month. So on the far left, we've got the current Petersburg amount based on those criteria. And we're sitting at the lowest point in the region. And we did include some outliers. Kodiak I included because it was an original member of the Four Dam Pool. And it's interesting to see where our rates are different from that utility. And we did include Seattle on the far right, it's the largest city in proximity to us that has huge economies of scale. But here we are in Petersburg, we're sitting at the lowest level of all those communities, including Wrangell, Ketchikan, Sitka, Juneau. And so with the proposed increases, again, that proposal that we just saw on the previous slide, Petersburg just does jump up, of course. And but by the second jump in FY23, we're still right in the middle of the pack regionally, and even on the lower end. I do know that Wrangell is starting a rate study right now, so I have a feeling that their rates are probably going to increase as well. No telling where that's going to go. Ketchikan did just have a rate increase done, and I think they had some rate increases earlier this year, so they're probably going to be stable for a while. Sitka and Juneau have this issue with the winter and summer rates, and it's interesting to see that the residential customers in Sitka have a much higher bill in the summer, whereas Juneau, it actually drops in the summer. But in both of those cases, Petersburg is very competitive with their rates, and even after the large increases that we're talking about. Next slide, please. The general service billing is what used to be called small commercial. And so it's basically small businesses and again, just a representation of what our bills would look like in comparison to other communities' bills. And again, what we're seeing is we're pretty competitive. We're right in the middle of the mix as far as the region is concerned. Next slide, please. And again, with large commercial, similar showing, although we're on the higher end, which is interesting to me. We are on the higher end of billing in Petersburg for large commercial. But like I said before, our cost of service analysis showed that our large commercial customers are paying more than their fair share for the infrastructure that we use in the power utility. So it would be interesting for me to see what the other communities, what a cost of service shows for them. I'm not really sure how that they're set up that way. Next slide, please. So with all that being said, and seeing that Petersburg is pretty competitive as far as electric rates, even after rate increase goes into place, I did get a hypothetical from Assemblymember Kensinger, and I'd heard it on the street as well. You know, do we really need this bond? Do we really need these projects? What if we just let Blind Slough go dark? You know, don't we get all of our power from SEPA? And you know, don't we? Do we really need to do this? And so I went down that avenue a little bit, and it was actually very helpful for me because it shows how important Blind Slough is. I did want to offer some information on the scenario in that it's really not an all or nothing, situation for Blind Slough. If the bond isn't approved, it's not like the facility is going to fail the next day and it won't be available to us. So I did want to temper this discussion with some facts that we would, if there's no support to rebuild Blind Slough from the assembly or the voters, we would nurse it along. We would do smaller projects that we could afford to keep it going for as long as possible. At some point, there would be a catastrophic failure out there, and we would enter a point where it would be unavailable to us. As we get to that point, maintenance costs are going to rise. There's going to be less availability of that facility while we're doing that. And of course, if there's no commitment from the borough to upgrade that or replace that facility in the long run, we need to plan for covering our peaks with diesel generation, because Blind Slough is a big part of our standby generation here in Petersburg. It's on our island. If SEPA isn't available, we have up to 2 megawatts of power that we can generate out there to our grid. If that's not available, then we need 2 more megawatts of diesel power available to us. Next slide, please. So just talking about the scenario, we again would not follow through with a refurbishment project if the bond was not approved. The facility would eventually fail, and we would dismantle and demolish it as needed. One important issue that I thought of as I was going through this was we do supply water to the Crystal Lake hatchery through our penstock. If there's not a powerhouse there or not a power project there, we're required by FERC to supply water to the hatchery, and there are parameters around that. Well, if there's not a project, then there's probably not a FERC permit, and there's not a requirement for the borough to provide water to the hatchery. It is, it's an issue that would definitely need a lot of discussion and a resolution to provide water to that facility. I'm supportive of the hatchery, and I would hate to see it fail because of a failure of the power plant out there. The financial analysis of not having Blind Slough available showed that we would have to purchase another 25% of our power from SEPA annually. So right now we purchase about $3.3 million worth of power. If it's not available, that goes up to 4.3 million, and that's today's dollars. Hard to say exactly when that's going to would fall into place, but as time goes by, loads increases and that number probably will get larger. As well, with the annual SEPA shutdowns, when we have to go on 100% diesel, we'll have an increase in fuel costs. So instead of $165,000 in fuel, we're looking at $263,000 in fuel annually. And those costs add significantly to the expenses of the utility. Again, with the without the availability of blind slough, we need to make sure we have diesel generation to cover what we get from blind slough. Next slide, please. I threw this slide in here as just a reminder of what we pay for power out of blind slough. This chart shows that currently we're able to provide power from the facility at 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour. During the construction period, because of the lesser amount of generation that we can provide, the price does go up. But as soon as the project is over and we can go back to normal production out there, the price goes down to 4.6 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, we're buying power from SEPA at 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour, and that could be going up to above 7 cents here in the next year. Next slide, please. Back to the scenario. So if we do let blind slough go dark, if we don't maintain it and keep it up, our standby generation, again, is very, very important to us. We need to be able to provide power to the community if SEPA is unavailable. The sizing of the standby generators that we're looking at, with the design study that the assembly just approved, becomes more important. Instead of maybe a 1.5 megawatt generator, we're maybe looking at 3.5 megawatts of generation to cover the community needs and make up for blind slough. I guess the one good thing about that scenario is that we probably wouldn't have to incur debt to add that generation, because without the larger blind slough project, we can probably fund that through reserves. But we still need to do that project to make sure that we can cover our customers at all times. And the rate consultant, when he ran this scenario, did find that rates actually go up higher if we don't do blind slough, because of the increased costs in power purchasing, increased costs in fuel purchasing, increased maintenance, and of course the larger generators needed, diesel generators needed to take the place of blind slough. Instead of a 19% increase over 2 years, we'd look at a 23% increase. It really, as I said, it was good for me to go down this road, because it just points to the fact that blind slough is so important. We get so much out of this 100-year-old facility that is just cranking along, providing really low cost power to the utility, and it helps our customers greatly. Next slide, please. So, yep, again, just restating some of the things I've already said. If blind slough is not available, we need diesels to pick up the entire load if SEPA is not with us. And we see a cost of power from blind slough at 1.3 cents. After the project should be 4.6 cents per kilowatt hour. From the rate study, we see that diesel generation costs about 18.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So the more we're on diesel, the more expenses of the utility rise. And as a comparison, and I know it's hard to really grab onto what the difference is between the cost of power to the final to the bill that comes in the mail. And so I tried to find a way to demonstrate that. And this is one way to look at it. For every 1,000 kilowatt hours that is provided by blind slough, the department offsets approximately $142,000 in fuel costs. So it really does help if we're dependent upon diesel to pick up the load for the community. Blind slough helps us tremendously. Next slide, please. So there's some conclusions here for the assembly and the public. we do rely on Blind Slough Hydro to reduce our expenses in the department, and it's stable, has stabilized rates in Petersburg for decades. If Blind Slough is left to fail or does fail, electric rates will actually need to increase more over what we're proposing in the current rate study to handle increased power purchases, fuel consumption, and addition of diesel generation. We have shown that the rate increases in Petersburg are still competitive with other Southeast Alaskan communities. That diesel generation is approximately 300% more costly than hydro generation from Blind Slough. That standby generation is vital to Petersburg, and especially if Blind Slough is not available to us in an outage. And the rate increases, nobody likes a rate increase. I don't like a rate increase, but it is, it's a fact of life that, critical infrastructure must be renewed from time to time. And the forethought of Blind Slough, for instance, was huge. People have saved money that they don't even realize because of that facility going on and on. We need to renew that so that we can provide benefits to the community for many more years. Last slide, please. So for nearly 100 years, Power and Light ratepayers have reaped the benefits from the forward-looking construction of the Blind Slough Hydro project. It has been 65 years since the last major upgrade. The current large powerhouse is that project where they built powerhouse, turbine generator, switchgear and governor. The proposed upgrade will keep the Blind Slough project operational as a low cost generation source for our community for many more years to come, decades to come. So with that, any questions?
Questions of Mr. Rader, Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a great presentation, Carl. That was great. We've seen reports in the news about Senator Murkowski working on an infrastructure bill and the president working on an infrastructure bill. Is there any way that some of these costs could be covered under an infrastructure bill that might be coming out of the federal government?
There's a possibility.
Okay.
We've been looking at it. I'm focused on the bond right now because it is a sure thing as long as we get acceptance, from the assembly and the voters. There is language in the proposed infrastructure bill that may provide money for this project. It's very uncertain until it's completely passed. And Steve has helped with some communication with the lobbyist to basically get that same assessment from him, is that we won't know until we know what's in the final bill. And I did see some language in there that looks like there's some possibility for money towards hydro and renewal of hydro specifically, but it's really hard to say if that's going to be a reality. And so we are facing a project that needs to get done, in my opinion. And the uncertainty of federal dollars, while still a possibility, is not making me feel very good about that.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Carl. That was a really good presentation. Okay, I know this is probably a question you can't answer, but since the last time we upgraded Blind Slough 65 years ago, can we expect the same type of time frame for this upgrade?
It would be great to expect that same type of longevity out of the new project, and we will get decades out of it, without major expense. Our consultant has let me know early on when we did the conditions assessment of the facility that it's pretty rare for a facility like this to go more than 10 years without a major bit of maintenance. And so they, McMillan Jacobs, did kind of throw that out early on, that the facility itself overall will last many, many decades, but we can't expect just to let it run. We're going to have to maintain it. We're going to have smaller projects here and there, but it won't require a large refit like we're looking at right now.
Just to follow up on that, this is a 30-year bond, I believe. So
Could be up to that.
Up to 30
I
years.
think we're looking at 25
25
in
years.
in the ordinance.
So then potentially after 25 years, if we don't have any major upgrades on the facility, then if we did happen to get another 40 years of life out of it, like we do this current one, then the cost of electrical generation would go down substantially, similar to what we're paying right now. So, and then my next question is, has there been any look or thought of increasing the capacity of Crystal Lake, or is that even entered into any of the discussions?
We did look at that. Yeah, absolutely. We looked at that. It is always a possibility, you know, when you're looking at hydro, if you can make it bigger and produce more power from that water source, then you want to do that. We have a lot of information about Crystal Lake and the hydrology of it, and basically what they found was that there's really no improvement. You know, the bowl is only so big up there. You can only, you know, count on so much water coming out of the sky and being caught in that watershed in the course of a year. So while we're going to see increased efficiency in the facility, and we will be able to produce the full permit rating of 2 megawatts from just the new powerhouse equipment, whereas now we would have to run both the 1950s unit and the 1920s unit to get up to the 2 megawatts. We'll be able to meet that at certain times of the year with just the one facility. But the overall production from that facility will likely be much the same as it is right now. It's based on, it's just water, you know, how much water we have to produce power with.
On the bonding, am I correct in saying that even though, let's say, the voters approve the bond, if we're able to secure some or part funding through the stimulus bill, then it doesn't mean that we have to borrow that whole amount. We can borrow up to what we need, or we could simply stop there and use the stimulus money. There will be some upfront costs to approve the bond, but we don't have to use it. Am I correct, Carl?
Not 100% on that. Member Lynn, Jody, do you have any thoughts on that? Is that if we find that the federal infrastructure bill does provide some money towards our project, or the possibility of it, that's the other thing, is that it takes a lot of time for those federal dollars to shake out of those bills and become available. So hard to say if even if there was money available, if it would be ready by the time we really needed to move forward on the project.
We're not quite sure exactly when we're going to be issuing bonds too, so that's the other factor. I mean, it could possibly not happen until next spring, so we have some time.
The other question was risk. When you talk about outages and so forth we have in town, do you think we would have, if we were full generator without Crystal Lake, do you believe we'd have more outages, less, the risk higher, lower? What would you guess is going to happen?
Well, there are definite good benefits from Crystal Lake just in system stability. Having that generator out at the end of our line, you know, does help the customers on that circuit quite a bit. I think their power quality would likely go down if Crystal Lake was not available. Just voltage support out towards the end of the line, out towards Papke's, where there's some significant development, would probably suffer a bit. We, as I said in the presentation, you know, without Blind Slough, in the wintertime, especially right now, we would not have the capacity to restore all of the community. If we did not have Blind Slough and SEPA went down, and we were in a really cold snap, we just wouldn't be able to do it with the generation that we have right now. So it's a very important discussion to have, that we make sure that we plan and understand what we're doing, you know, for supporting the community if Blind Slough were not to be approved.
For Tremblay, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carl. It was informational. So hopefully everything comes together. We can enjoy another 65 years from
Hope so.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So next on the agenda is Development Code Update, and Community and Economic Development Director Cabrera will discuss the next steps for the new development code.
Through the mayor, Liz Cabrera. Let's see, just wanted to give you, going back to when you last had it in your hands, which was in 2019, the development code, and you had requested the planning commission to review certain aspects of it, specifically the industrial zoning section. And the planning commission did take that back up again and basically started from square one on public outreach and notification, and took a few months to go through that section of the code, as well as any other issues that came up, and completed that work probably by the end of the summer of 2019. At that point, we started consolidating all those amendments into the full body of the code. And then in March, early March of 2020, very early March, that was sent to the borough attorney to start the process of a last review and ordinance development. And I think by mid-March, she had sent back a list of potential amendments that she wanted to see. But also by that time, it really wasn't possible to continue working on that. So that got laid aside and is still laid aside, and probably, I would say, not be available to be picked up at least for 6 or 8 months, just because of the backlog of work that we have from last year, and also staffing changes in our department. So I don't really want to bring it forward until we can roll it out in an orderly way, and we really can't do that in the short term. So it would take a few months for us to be able to be in a position to do that. So and that's about what I have on that.
Thanks for your update, Ms. Cabrera. Are there any questions? Okay, Member Kinsinger.
Yeah, just a comment. Yeah, thanks, Liz, because I've had a lot of people ask me about that. And I, having been involved with that on planning and zoning for many years, it was a long process. And I appreciate that if we roll it out again in the future, that it be orderly as you've described, and that people have ample opportunity to take a second look at it.
Okay, moving on the agenda here is the mayor's report. And I'd like to issue congratulations, and the assembly, along with me, would like to congratulate Art Hammer on his 100th birthday. Happy belated birthday, Art. We're still seeking letters of interest. The assembly is seeking letters of interest from borough residents who wish to serve the community by filling a vacant seat on the following boards and commissions until the October 21st, 2021 municipal election. Planning Commission, 1 vacant seat. Public Safety Advisory Board, 2 vacant seats, and letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the borough office located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by mailing to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. But at this point, you may as well just put your name in for the election coming up in October. August 24th, I believe, is the deadline to submit your signature page for candidacy.
Correct.
Okay, so anybody interested should start circulating those signature pages. Been kind of out of the loop here for the couple months on the assembly side of things, but I attended a tour of the Cake Road, August 3rd and 4th, invited by Kiewit. Other attendees were John McKinnon, he's Commissioner of DOT, Joseph Kemp from DOT, I believe he was the job engineer on that project, Jason Bloom from DOT, Sam Dapovich from DOT, and then there was Kip Knudsen from the governor's office in DC, myself, Mayor Lloyd Davis from Cake, 3 state senators, Click Bishop, Senator Bert Stedman, and Josh Reback. The road is like 95% complete. We did half the tour one afternoon on the 3rd, the other half the morning of the 4th. Their planned open date to the public on the road is October 1st. They still have some work to do. They've got a 100-foot long culvert, multi-plate culvert. That's about 12 or 14 feet in diameter. And it's 5,000 bolts to bolt it together. It's in a pretty deep hole, so they're backfilling that. They're also waiting for the concrete planks for the boat ramp at 12 Mile. It's 300 feet long and it will be down to a -3 foot tide. I drove by there late in the day on the 4th or about midday on the 4th, and there was a little bit of a wind blowing from the southeast. And where the ramp is going to be located, there is a little bit of protection from a rock point that sticks out. So it was flat calm in by the beach and a little bit choppy offshore. The 12 Mile bridge is another major part of the job they're waiting for. It's a 90-foot permanent bridge, comes in 3 pieces. They'll tow it to the site, put it together, and right now they have a temporary bridge across 12 Mile Creek. So potentially opening the road to the public October 1st. Then I thought this was kind of interesting. The job contract closing date is November of 2022. And the reason for that is to make sure all the hydro seeding has taken place and you know, stabilizing the embankments. So it was, I've been, you know, using those roads over there for hunting purposes for the last 19 years or so, and it's going to be quite an improvement. Lloyd Davis, the mayor from Cake, was pretty excited. In fact, he drove to the multi-plate culvert site, walked through the ditch, and got a ride from Val Bean, who is the project engineer on the job, and from Cake. She's working out of Juneau. So anyway, I think it's going to be well used. And another thing I was going to mention, and I don't know if anybody on the assembly has got the email, but Southeast Conference is in Haines, September 14th through the 16th, I believe. Is that right, Thompson? Have you got any information on that yet?
Yes, I believe that Member Kinzinger is attending.
Okay, and I won't be able to. I'll probably be in Portland for some medical stuff. Got a phone call from Ray Matuszewski, our state lobbyist today. I had a conversation with Manager Giesbrecht this morning about our local DMV office. Contract is signed, the IT is turned on to the building, and they were kind of surprised the lights weren't on this morning. So maybe this afternoon, maybe tomorrow. So that's it for the mayor's report, unless there's any questions. Seeing none, we'll turn it over to the manager for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're having a couple of issues with some pilings in the South Harbor that were put in 1984. They're rotting off at the mud line, and the harbor is working with Tamco and Rock and Road to see if we can design a fix for them. Fire station is open to walk-in traffic. However, the training room remains closed to the public. Fire, EMS, search and rescue are continuing to accept volunteer applications. So if you want to be involved, please get with them. Visitation continues at assisted living. Call 772-2445 with any questions. Make sure you know the rules on visiting folks up there. We're still having a problem with the state of Alaska background check program. DHSS still has no access to some of the programs, stuff that they need. And so it's all manual and very, very slow process. We continue to have resident assistant positions open at assisted living. We have 2 40-hour positions and a 30-hour position. Applications can be found on the Borough website. Thanks to the PMC doctors who continue to see residents up at the manor for routine appointments. Big thank you to Dr. Heyer. Mindy and Sheilyn continue to meet with Dr. Heyer as a physician liaison between the facilities monthly. We are grateful for her willingness to do this. It continues to go very well. Elderly housing is full. Assisted living has 1 vacant apartment, which will be filled probably by now, but first part of August. On Sunday night, 7/26, we had a fire alarm go off at the elderly housing due to a leak in the sprinkler system. Thanks to the fire department for their quick response. We got John Taylor out on the 27th, and he did some work with Brian Haley on the system. We're gonna have to replace some pipes and repairs over this next month to get it up to speed and back working at full capacity. The Alaska Housing Finance Corporation is slated to receive an estimated $50 million to assist homeowners impacted by COVID-19. Pending guidance from U.S. Treasury, Alaska Housing Finance will announce details, including eligibility and the application process. Interested by homeowners can sign up to receive updates about mortgage relief at ahfc.us. Juneau Economic Development Council contacted PEDC about partnering on a regional Small Business Association Community Navigator grant application. This is a new program established under the American Rescue Plan. If successful, the grant would provide 2 years of funding for PEC to add part-time staff to provide business support and education. Our water staff recently met with a technician that provides conditions assessments of metallic water pipe and will be doing some work for Sitka and Juneau in the future. There's a possibility that multiple communities could schedule work to occur at the same time to lower mobilization costs for the service. Carl is looking into receiving a quote for the service for various trouble areas in our water distribution system. Pre-construction meeting was scheduled with Rock and Road Construction for July 29th for the Ira 2 Street Sewer Project. Our line crew has been very, very busy in Power and Light with line extensions and service work. And our electrician continues to install the AMI meters in the harbor. Line apprentice interviews were held and a decision is in the process of being made or made. I don't want to see, that was Carl's lead in. Can you announce who it is? I didn't want to jump the gun.
We did offer a job to David Mazzella, local, and he has accepted.
He'll be our newest lineman apprentice. So congratulations. Power and Light is in the process of finalizing the search for the new office manager. At the time, Sue Flannery is retiring on October 1st. She's going to be very hard to fill, extremely hard to fill what she knows about the department and has been integral for our success for many, many years. Please congratulate her on her retirement. We see her and she'll be missed greatly once October rolls around. And I think we've done interviews on that. Okay.
Well, no news on the interviews, but I did want to point out that Sue has graciously offered to stick around until the 1st of December now. So
Great.
we get her expertise for a couple more months and I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you very much. This report was written 2 weeks ago for the other meeting, so I'm having to change it on the fly, so I apologize. Reconstruction work continues on the motor pool building. We are hoping to be back in the facility before the weather gets colder. They were doing some concrete work up there last week and kind of making it smoother so the creepers can move easier and installing some of the extra equipment that goes along with it. So we're getting closer. We continue to have an open mechanic position in the motor pool and a facility maintenance position at Parks and Rec. Be helping do some interviews on the maintenance position later this week. If we can catch Stephanie on her vacation and do a Zoom interview. And, as you heard from Phil, we had lots of positive cases in COVID in Southeast Alaska. So please get vaccinated if if you're interested and help protect our town. We only have 2 active cases, I believe, at the moment here. So we're doing something right. But let's kind of keep it that way if we can. And the mayor stole my thunder on DMV, so I'll take that off of there. But we've been working on it for, Mark, 3 weeks, a month? I mean, trying to get an answer and hopefully it's coming to a head and getting opened up here pretty quick.
Well, we'll see. It'd be nice to see the open sign on again.
Yeah.
Any questions of the manager on his report? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Steve, thanks for the updates on shutting the water off of that house out the road.
Oh, yeah.
What does that homeowner have to do to get the water turned back on?
Well, file a building permit with a reputable contractor with a plan to reinstall the sewer system connecting to our system. That has to be approved by our building inspector. And then the work actually gets done. And then we could turn it back on. Carl, did I miss anything? That's what I thought.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for your report. If there's no other questions, we'll move on unless people want to take a short break before we get into unfinished business. Everybody want to continue? Okay, we'll move forward. Next item, item 15, unfinished business. This is ordinance 2021-12, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of electric utility revenue bonds in an aggregate amount not to exceed 7.8 million to finance the Blind Slough Hydroelectric refurbishment project and the Scow Bay standby generation project, and directing that this matter be submitted to the voters for consideration at the next regular election to be held on October 5th, 2021. This is the second reading. I'd entertain a motion to approve this in the second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Nucci, seconded by member Kinsinger. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance passes in its second reading. That brings us to item 16, new business. Item A, authorize removal of the FAA site from municipal selection. Community Development Director Cabrera recommends the borough relinquish 3.5 acre FAA site at Frederick Point from the municipal selections and have DNR retain ownership due to contamination at the site. So I entertain a motion to remove that land from our selection.
Second.
Motion's been made by member Nucci, seconded by member Kinsinger. Any discussion? So, oh, go ahead.
No,
member
no,
Nucci.
Mr. Mayor, I was just gonna ask maybe.
So this site at Point Frederick has been like similar to what they're cleaning up out in Duncan Canal. Does it have, or Level Island, does it have contamination on it then?
It does. It's on the DEC contaminated sites list, and it has high levels of arsenic, which exceed the normal background levels that you'd see. And DEC will put institutional controls on it, which basically go with the land and are on there forever. And so whoever owns a property is responsible for making sure that those institutional controls are followed, which is usually, you know, if you're going to move dirt from the site, you'd have to get prior DEC approval. And then if it's anywhere near the contaminated site, it would have to be disposed of appropriately. So.
No, thanks for the explanation. It sounds like a good piece of property not to own. So any other discussion? Clerk call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item B under new business. That's Papke's and Banana Point Engineering Service Proposal. The Assembly will consider the engineering service proposal from Horai and Associates Incorporated, which includes a Banana Point breakwater replacement design and Papke's Landing Marine Facility conceptual plans. So I'd entertain a motion to approve this request.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Kinsinger, seconded by member Lynn. Any discussion on this engineering proposal? Member Lynn.
I really like the proposal that was put together. I would make one comment on it, that we, on the Papke's Landing area, there's other land out there that's owned by Mental Health Trust. We have 2 lots to the, adjacent to the highway. In the planning and looking at future plans, we probably would want to look at some of these types of things to be included. And I think that once some conceptual plans is done, I think that you'd also have an idea or recommendations for us of which lands we would want to pursue acquiring, and some idea of our approach maybe. And I think that would really fall out of it with the proposal I see.
Discussion, member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So currently we don't, these properties aren't, they don't belong to the borough. Is that right?
I believe you're correct.
Mr. Mayor, may I just clarify something?
Sure, manager.
There's 2 lots the borough does own that we purchased from Mental Health that I would call them good lots for parking, so to speak. They're uplands. So that we do, the borough does own. The borough does not own the dock, the tidelands, or the ramp, or the parking lot.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a follow-up thing, currently the state has the entrance island dock and, that's part of the borough. And we have this at Papke's and Banana Point. Wouldn't it behoove us to, if we're gonna move forward with this design concept of this, to at least enter into conversation with the state about getting these three parcels, or these three, the entrance point and Papke's, Banana Point and Kupernoff, which are in the boroughs, wouldn't those be part of that discussion to do some of this work? It seems weird to me to spend money on something that we don't own.
I have kind of the same thoughts as Member Mucci on this. But I think the last time we had a discussion with the state with DOT was multiple years ago, maybe up to 4 or 5 years ago. And you're right, Entrance Island, Kupernoff dock, and the one at Pappy's, it was a package deal. You take all of them or none of them, they weren't gonna negotiate. And the one at Entrance Island, I haven't seen in years, but last time I saw it, if you didn't have boots on, you stepped off your boat, you were gonna get wet, it's sinking. So I don't know if I'd even tie up to it. So I don't know. And just for the public listening, the proposed engineering services is, total cost is $17,500 for the Banana Point breakwater replacement design, and the Pappy's Landing Marine Facility conceptual plans, $18,420 for a total of $35,920. And I should have mentioned that dollar value at the start of this discussion, but now it's out there. So any other discussion? Member Kinzer, Member Lynn?
Oh, I was just going to say that what the mayor says is correct. And I think the mayor and I have had meetings when we were in Juneau on these particular pieces of land. And I don't see this improving in the future. I don't see the state being able to come back and say, we'll give you $5 million, $6 million to do anything. Yet we have a borough and we want to have some access to our, to Mitkoff Island and so forth. So we have and provide better recreation opportunities. So I believe we have to get some kind of an approach to this. And the better we are at having our act together, so to speak, I think the better off we are in the future trying to get money through either a stimulus package or some other way to help us do it. If we have an approach that's kind of even been vetted at some point in time later with the public. Thank you.
Kinzer, do you have input?
Yes, I agree with Member Lynn. And at some point we got to start. And this is a start. And I have used Papke's for close to 40 years now. And the only thing that's really keeping that facility afloat is just from a few of the users out there spending money and time on it to make it happen. And it's not going to last that much longer. And, this goes back to the inception of the borough, and I have no wish at all to go through that horrible process once again. But one of the things that was promised at that time was this would be one of the issues that the borough would be in a position to address. Because every time as a private person, you approach the state, you approach mental health or DNR, they just blow you off because you don't have any standing with them. So the borough is the only entity that's in this area that has a standing that can negotiate with the state, mental health, or DNR to solve the situation out there. So if we wait until some point in the future when the state wants to do something, there's not going to be a dock out there. And the discussion is going to be, when are we going to condemn this property? When is the state going to come and put a big barrier across and say you can't use this anymore? And as far as Banana Point's concerned, I don't think we have to really worry about who owns the property. I don't think the state's going to be concerned if we want to upgrade their facility so that it is safe and usable. And that's basically what we're talking about doing. And if we don't start on this process now, we're never going to start on it. And both of these facilities will be at risk of just going away. And if you want to try and have all the boats launched in town out of the South Boat Harbor, we're going to have a mess. We need to have some other locations on the island for people to launch boats. We need to have other locations on the island so people can access this. So just from an economic development standpoint, this is an essential project. From a recreational standpoint, these are both essential projects. So, you know, at some point we gotta start. And this is a small dollar amount investment for the borough to show good faith to those of us that supported the formation of the borough, and you know, to make good on the promise that they made to a bunch of us about 10 years ago.
Any other input? Member Tremblay, do you have any input on this topic?
Just echoing the comments of this as pretty essential infrastructure that we need to be supporting in whatever way we can. And so if the state picks it up from here after we hand deliver some plans, I say that's awesome. If they end up not wanting anything to do with it and it becomes ours, then that's a further conversation. But I agree that time doesn't help us in this, and we just need to take some steps forward. So looking forward to seeing the designs and hoping this passes.
And I have a question, I guess it'd be for the manager. This $35,000 and change is coming from the property development money, where we talked about it at a meeting in the spring.
Yeah, yes, sir. This was approved as part of the budget process this past year.
Okay. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just, so I'm clear, so this is just design work for both of those projects. And at the same time, are we going to enter into discussions with the state about these, or we're just going to continue, we're going to spend this $35,000 on it? And when the conversation gets around, how are we, I'm just trying to sort out how we're going to, and how that conversation is going to happen with the state. I mean, and when does that conversation happen?
Well, anytime, I suppose I could try to answer that. Anytime we want to start the negotiation with DOT again, and I'm sure they'd love to give these facilities away now more than they did 5 years ago, because like Member Kinzinger said, they are, you know, in disrepair, but I still have a hard time spending $35,000 on design work for some projects on property that we don't own. That's my hang up at this point. So anyway, Member Lynn?
Yeah, go back to Member Mucci's question. I think we're in a stronger position if we get a much better idea of what it would take to bring it up. I think we're in a much stronger negotiation position if we wait, if we do some work, wait, and then go back, because we have something in hand to argue for or against. It's down the road. And, you know, I think the state would like to give them to us in a heartbeat, but I don't think we want to take them until we get ourselves in a little bit better position. That's kind of where I'm at, and know what we're dealing with.
Any other comments before I ask the clerk to call the roll? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
David?
Yes. Okay, was that a 4-1 vote?
Yes.
Okay. So next item has been moved to the end of the meeting. Next item under new business is letter to Senator Murkowski. Assembly Member Lynn requested this agenda item. The Assembly will consider approval of a letter to Senator Murkowski regarding her efforts to secure funding to do the preliminary work on the new hospital in Petersburg. And the letter basically just thanks her for putting that, I believe it was $8 million into the proposed budget or whatever they're working on. I don't know if it's even been discussed or voted on in the Senate, but it still has to go through the House and then presidential signature. So anyway, this letter's on the website if anybody wants to read it. So I entertain a motion to approve sending this letter.
I'll move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion. Discussion on the letter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That's the best thing to do. Just yell at me. I'm not always looking at the screen. Member Tremblay.
I just wanted to thank Assemblymember Lynn for the letter. I think it's an excellent one, and hopefully it just gets that gratitude back, because it was it's an important step for this facility, and hopefully it stays in the bill as it makes its way through Congress. So I encourage the public to go find it as part of the packet or the minutes for next week's meeting, I guess.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. Any other discussion? Okay, my feelings on the letter are, I appreciate the senator doing this for us, or trying to get this done for us. But I think right now with the hospital project, my personal opinion is I think we're still looking for community buy-in. So to support whatever direction we end up taking. I appreciate the conversation earlier with Mr. Hofstadter and the assembly about the open dialogue and how we move forward from here. So I'm kind of on the fence whether I'll vote for this or not. So that's my input. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda, let me get back to the agenda here. It's item E, review of ADNR's final finding and decision for ADL 108579. Community Development Director Cabrera will present the decision of DNR regarding selected lands in Woodpecker Cove and Olson's Log Dump. So could you give us a brief explanation? I'm just following the agenda here, what it says, so.
I don't know about brief, but so you might recall several months ago, you approved some comments on this ADL, and it actually represented the priority selections for the borough. So this is the land that was selected before we knew we were going to get 14,000 acres, when we just thought we were going to get 1,700 acres. So this really was kind of the high priority selections. So months go by, and ADNR goes through their process, and then they finally released a final finding, which is their final decision. In the comments that the borough submitted, we objected to two things. One of them was that the state wanted to retain the track 37, which is Olson's Log Dump. And the other thing that we objected to was there's a lot that is just south of Woodpecker Cove. It's an undeveloped lot. They want to retain half of it, the half that's closest to the Woodpecker Cove ramp and LTF facility. So in their final decision, the state reaffirmed that those decisions, and they would like to retain those lots. So now it comes back to the borough, and the borough has 20 days to decide whether it wants to appeal the decision. That appeal goes to DNR. The decision is based on criteria that are not written down, but are described as in the best interest of the state. So we would have to show as the borough that it's actually better interest of the borough, overwhelming over the state's interest to get that land for the DNR commissioner to change the decision. If we don't appeal, the decision becomes final. We don't really have another opportunity to go back and select those lands again. So that's it, as concisely as I can make it.
This is our last chance to officially object.
Correct, yeah. It could still, and after DNR, you could still take it to court. You could continue to object. That would be another decision down the road.
Member Lynn, you have a comment?
A couple of them, yes. I've looked at this now twice with Liz, and I can stand on both sides of the fence and argue both sides of should we object or should we not. There's a couple parts of this that make sense. The particular plot that Liz was talking about that's platted, that to me, we should make a case at least on that one to say we should retain it, because their logic they used is that they needed to retain it so that if they ever wanted to use, put logs in the water and so forth, there would be no physical barriers or anything else around it. The other opposite side of their logic is that, well, they have control over the tide water. So they, if we were to have those lands, sell lots there, and they did not want the public to have docks out there, then for heaven's sakes, they have that authority because they have control over it. So as a minimum, I think we need to challenge that particular part of it. But then I go back arguing that we'll probably lose, but I really think we ought to challenge the other two, because if you look at access to water here, both with Woodpecker and with Olson's, and I understand why they want to retain it, because they said, well, the state might want to water logs at those two locations in the future. But we also we use those all the time for recreation. And if we don't lose this opportunity, then we're at a point, we don't have any, there's no options. There's no other than to go to court sometime later, or maybe through their generosity, we get it back. But I think it'd be worth challenging. But I argue myself on both sides of it. I don't feel strong, but I really think we at least put a letter in saying we disagree with it.
So what would the process be, Liz, to, appeal their decision here? Just say we don't agree and then list out the reason why, and then we have 20 days to come up with that, correct?
Correct. Well, less than that now.
What's that?
Less than that now.
Right,
Yeah.
so
20 days from when it was signed.
what's the deadline?
I think it's the 20th.
So we have time to address this at our next meeting?
Well, no, it would have to be written and drafted and done so that it could be sent the day after your meeting.
The next meeting on the 16th.
Right. So, okay, it's the 16th. So then it's the 17th. So we would have to have the appeal written and drafted and ready to send by the time of your next meeting.
So I guess what I'm getting at is if we vote to appeal this decision by the state, and then you'd have time to draft up our response and we could approve that at the next meeting. Do you think that's necessary, or am I overthinking this?
It's your call. I mean, this is, I'm just sort of giving you the concept, so you haven't really seen anything, and I would definitely have the attorney draft it, just because it's a little bit more technical, and she's very thorough in what she does. So I'd probably work with her
Okay, so
between
what's
now
the-
and then. So it's
Yeah.
up to you whether you want to approve the final letter or not.
How does the assembly feel on this topic? Member Kinsinger.
Mr. Mayor, simply, I think we should definitely appeal this, and I don't see any problem with Liz working with the attorney to draft this. I think we should vote right now on whether we want to proceed with the appeal, and if the assembly's wishes to move forward with this, and I think that's Liz's direction to draft the appeal.
Okay, so then how do we approach this procedurally right? We have to just made a motion to discuss this or review it. So we're reviewing it. Do we have to make another motion to appeal?
So if we made a motion to discuss it, I missed it. I didn't write down any names. Did someone make a motion? I think we just make a motion now to appeal or not.
Okay.
And second.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion that we appeal DNR's decision and that we direct Liz with the attorney to draft a letter.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion been made by member Kinsinger, seconded by member Lynn to appeal the decision of DNR to keep the Woodpecker Cove portion and portion of Blind Slough. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just for procedural purposes, so has it now become an action item that wasn't originally an action item?
It is an action item.
It is an action.
Under
It's
new
under new
business.
business.
And I thought we made a motion, but maybe we didn't. Maybe
I'll listen. I might have missed it, but I
we
didn't
might
write down
not
any
have done it
names.
either, so anyway, like I said, a little rusty here. So anyway, that's the new motion on the floor, is to have Community Development Director Cabrera and our attorney work on a letter to appeal the state wanting to retain these two portions of land. Any discussion on that? Clerk, call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that passes. That's the last of the new business. Under communications and correspondence received since July 15th, 2021 is listed on the agenda. If anybody's interested to see what the communication has been. And we will continue on through assembly discussion items. And then, so that manager, Manager's evaluation form. This discussion item was requested by Assembly Member Mucci. So Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think without taking up too much time in this meeting, I just wanted this document to be presented to the assembly, but we can, I had no action for it. I just wanted the assembly to see it. So when we got into the discussion of the manager's contract, we would have it. I don't expect to do anything on it, and we can certainly talk about it at a later date or at a later date, but I just wanted the assembly to have it. That's all.
And I see the clerk has sent an email out with the evaluation form and the proposed deadline. So, and since we're on the topic, if you could print me out a hard copy, that would be great.
Bet.
Any other discussion on the manager evaluation form? Okay, that brings us to assembly member comments. Any assembly members have comments? Member Tremblay, I saw you wave that time.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to give an update on why I was out of town last week. I was at the Conference of Young Alaskans that was hosted by Alaska Municipal League at the invitation of the Executive Director, Nils Andreasen, myself, and 4 other assembly members representing Juneau, Ketchikan, Palmer, and Nome. We were facilitators and kind of chaperones for 37 young Alaskans, 16 to 25, that we met in Fairbanks, and they learned a lot about municipal government in a very short amount of time. And it was a fun experience getting to see people understand context of local government in Alaska. And they were meeting finance directors for the first time, learned what a clerk did, all this kind of stuff that was quite impactful for them. And then at the end of it, they had produced, they met by topics that they were passionate about. And as groups, they ended up writing 24 resolutions, and they presented their top ones to the Conference of Mayors that had just convened at the beginning of their conference. And so it was very invigorating. It was very inspiring to see so many young people interested in local government. And they were people who were currently still in the state. Some were away at school, but just happened to be here for the summer. And yeah, it was put on by Alaska Municipal League. It was the 4th one, the 4th COYA that's ever happened. And so we had some past alums who are currently elected members of bodies come speak. And they heard from a lot of people, and it was very inspiring. And so I just wanted to give that report and mention that, we didn't have anyone from Petersburg that was there, but if anybody knows of any young people that would be interested in that kind of a hyperlocal version of that, I would be more than happy to connect with them and just start talking local government, because you can't start breaking stuff down too early. So yeah, just wanted to give that report. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to talk about it, but it was a great time, and I'm grateful to AML for the opportunity.
Thanks for the update on that trip. Any other assembly member comments? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I mentioned earlier, I have a couple of agenda items for the next meeting next Monday. Just to give the assembly an update. I think we need to do more to have a presence and on the COVID information. I noticed I said earlier that there's no mention of COVID on the Borough website, and I think we need to rethink that. I'm hoping that the manager can figure out a way to move forward with this. Small group would be best, but that's what I'm aiming for, is to get more active with somebody from the borough sitting in on all the meetings that are, all or most of the meetings that go on between the school and the hospital, so that the assembly can be more informed about what's going on. Like I said earlier, I'm a little uncomfortable with the lack of information I see. I mean, I really have to reach out to get it. The hospital's doing a good job of getting as much as they can, but I think we need to be a little bit more proactive on this. Like I said earlier, the borough is the umbrella that covers the whole community, and I don't think the hospital or the school feels that the borough is doing enough. And my second agenda item is going to be some discussion at the assembly level about some of the plans that the school board and the school has in place for opening up the school here in a couple of weeks. They've asked for some of our comments from the borough assembly discussing their new guidance for opening the school, and I think next week would be a good time for us to weigh in on some of the things. So I just wanted to give the assembly a little bit of heads up. So Thank you.
Any other assembly member comments? So was there, oh, well, go ahead, Member Kinser.
Yes, I'm also going to have an item on the agenda for the next meeting. And basically what it is right now for us to conduct a meeting, we have to have a 4 in-person quorum to meet. Obviously during COVID, we suspended that rules, but now that we're back to normal operations, we have to have 4 in person. And I've submitted an ordinance change that would allow us, for the purposes of a quorum, to count people that are present either via Zoom or telephonically. So everybody think about that. It's going to be on the agenda next week.
Any other comments by assembly members? So quick question for Clerk Thompson on Member Kinsinger's. Does that have anything to do with the charter or is it just strictly code?
It's just code.
Okay. And a question for Member Mucci on the school board sent out their plans. Did they send an email on their opening plans? Okay, I must have
Did.
missed it. I'll look
Thank you,
back.
sir.
All right, thanks. So are there any recognitions by any assembly members or staff? Okay, seeing none. We're gonna have to finish the meeting by going into an executive session to discuss the manager's contract. That was item 9. And then after we're done with that executive session, we will come back into open session and we will address item 16C on the agenda, and that is the manager's contract. So let's, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss Manager Giesbrecht contract renewal request. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break or wait till the room clears out. What's that?
That's good.
Oh, great. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Taylor.
Okay, Taylor's here. We have Assembly Member Norheim has called into the meeting, so it's Assembly Members Tremblay, Mucci, Kinsinger, Lynn, and Mayor Jensen. And we're coming back into regular session, and we're going to address item 16C, which we put to the end of the meeting, and it's an extension of Manager Giesbrecht's contract. So I'd entertain a motion to extend Manager Giesbrecht's contract.
So
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Lynn. And we have a letter from Manager Giesbrecht dated July 7th. And thank you for the continued support of Petersburg, the borough staff, and me as well. As you may know, I have an employment contract which is currently in effect until October of 2022. I would like to stay as the borough manager past this time and would like the assembly to consider renewing my contract. It would be helpful if I knew the assembly's will on this issue prior to the expiration of my current contract, which is next year. I'm asking the assembly to consider renewing my contract until October of 2027, an additional 5 years from the 10/20/22 expiration date. As part of this contract extension, I am requesting an increase to my annual salary of 5%, and that's for the whole 5 years. Every year he gets, it'll be $6,049 a year more. He is currently at 121 and change, 121,000 and change. And that would be an annual salary of $127,043. I would like this increase to be effective October 2022 with no other increases for the additional 5 years of the extended contract. I would like all other terms of the contract to remain the same, termination and et cetera. So please let me know your thoughts. So that is what we're discussing here. So is there any discussion on the motion to approve the manager's request? Ramucci.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think Steve's done a really good job getting us through the COVID. I think it was a tough slog for everybody who was involved. A long 15 months. I think it was tough on everybody who was involved. And I think Steve's done an admirable job and I'm happy with the job he's doing.
Okay, thank you. Any other assembly members have any comments before I have the clerk call the roll? Member Norheim, are you with us?
I am.
Okay, perfect. Well, seeing Member Trimley's hand not going up and no one in the chambers wanting to, any input, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Oh, and Jay's in.
Sorry, I got done with work and just showed up. I figured I had time, so apologies for interrupting, but I'm here.
Just in time.
So just for the record, Assembly Member Stanton Greger has zoomed in as well. And do you know where we're at here, Jay?
No, sir.
Besides
Just,
Petersburg?
besides the packet.
You're kind of broken.
But no, I'm not up to speed on where we're at. I just logged on.
We put the manager's contract extension request to the end of the meeting. We just got out of executive session and discussed his contract, and we are in the process of voting on his contract. Do you have a copy of his request?
I most certainly do. Have any amendments to the contract been done that I should know about?
None.
Then I vote yes.
Okay, we were just to the point of that you will be the first vote. Clerk Thompson, will you please register that vote?
Yes. Thank you.
I wasn't sure who you were there for a minute.
I can't imagine why.
Okay, please continue calling the roll.
Okay, so he was actually the third vote.
Oh, he was the third. Okay, well,
Okay.
you were third in line, I guess.
Okay, Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
all very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, so that wraps up our meeting, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
I'll move.
Okay, well, okay, it's motion been made in a second. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
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 That was a quick meeting for you, Jay.
Indeed. Hilarious timing. All right, see ya.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we saw the hair, we got kind of scared.